A billionaire left his safe wide open, not by mistake, but on purpose. Money bag. Why? Because he wanted to test his cleaning lady's 6-year-old daughter. He thought he'd catch her stealing, but what this little girl did instead left him frozen in shock. Thomas Mitchell, a 45-year-old billionaire, sat still in his leather chair, his eyes half closed, pretending to be asleep, but secretly watching every move in the room. In front of him, the safe door stood wide open, stuffed with more money than most people would ever see in their entire life. That night, Diana, his cleaning lady, entered the office with her daughter, Jasmine. For 2 years, Diana had worked the night shift, and little Jasmine often came along, wearing the tiny pink gloves her mother had bought her. Thomas wasn't really asleep. He was testing them. After a business partner had stolen $3 million from him, his faith in honesty was gone. So tonight, he wanted to see, was anyone truly honest? As Diana dusted the shelves, little Jasmine wandered closer to the table. Her eyes lit up when she saw the stacks of bills, more money than she had ever imagined. Thomas held his breath. Any second now, she'll grab some, he thought. But then, Jasmine did something that made his throat tighten. Instead of taking even a single dollar, the 6-year-old carefully began stacking the bills, straightening them, and sorting them by size and number, just the way her mother had taught her to organize coins at home. "Mommy," Jasmine whispered. Mr. Thomas's money was all messy. "I fixed it." Diana gasped. "Jasmine, you can't touch the boss's things." "But it was messy, Mom. He'll be happy when he wakes up." At that moment, Thomas felt something he hadn't felt in years, pure emotion. This little girl, who had probably never even held $20 at once, had organized a fortune without the slightest thought of stealing. And what Thomas didn't know yet was that this small act of innocence was about to change his life forever. Thomas thought he'd seen the worst in people, but nothing prepared him for what he overheard that night. A powerful executive, Richard Blackwood, mocked his loyal cleaner, Diana, and even threatened her little girl. What Richard didn't know was that every single word was being recorded, and soon, those same words would destroy him. Story continues. "We always return what isn't ours, even if no one is watching," Diana whispered to Jasmine one night as they cleaned. "Our honesty is worth more than any money in the world." Her words struck Thomas harder than he expected. Diana's life had never been easy. She lost her parents at 9 and grew up in foster care. She worked her way through high school, never able to afford college. At 22, she became a single mother when Jasmine's father abandoned them. Since then, she carried the weight of raising her daughter alone, never begging, never asking for charity, only working harder. Thomas, deeply moved, began helping in secret. He increased Diana's salary quietly, labeling it as a category adjustment so she wouldn't notice it came from him. But one man did notice. Richard Blackwood. At a board meeting, the vice president raised his eyebrows at the numbers. "Thomas, why are we wasting money on cleaning staff? Especially her?" "Because she's excellent at her job," Thomas replied calmly. Richard chuckled cruelly. "Excellent? Thomas, you need to understand where people like her belong. Give them a coin, and soon they'll ask for the whole vault. It's in their nature." Thomas clenched his jaw, holding back his anger. Richard was the spoiled son of one of the founders, a man whose opinions had always been tolerated because of his wealth. "And another thing," Richard continued, "she brings that child with her. What kind of mother exposes a kid to a corporate office? Clearly, she doesn't have a proper family." Thomas stayed quiet for now, but inside a fire was building. That evening, the fire turned into rage. Richard stayed late, and when he crossed paths with Diana, he cornered her in the hallway. "I know you're getting more money than you deserve," he sneered. "I don't know what kind of favors you're doing, but it ends now." Diana froze. "Sir, I don't understand." "Of course you don't," he said, stepping closer. "People like you never do. Just take what you're given and stay quiet. And keep that child out of here. This isn't a daycare." Jasmine whimpered, hiding behind her mother, terrified. Diana held her close. "Sir, I'm just doing my job," she whispered. "Your job is to clean and be invisible. Nothing else." From his office, Thomas watched everything. His chest tightened, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was pure, righteous anger. Richard had gone too far. He had insulted Diana, frightened her child, and exposed his cruel nature. What Richard didn't know was that the very security cameras he had ordered to monitor employees had just recorded his every hateful word. Thomas had the proof, but he wanted more than proof. He wanted Richard to destroy himself publicly, so completely that he would never again be respected in business circles. Richard thought he was untouchable. He mocked, he lied, and he humiliated Diana every chance he got. But what he didn't know was that Thomas, the billionaire he served under, was recording everything and planning his downfall with the help of a former FBI investigator. Richard wasn't just writing his own destruction. He was speeding it up. Story continues. Thomas sat alone in his office, replaying the footage of Richard's insults. With each word, his anger turned into something sharper, a plan. He wasn't just going to protect Diana and Jasmine. He was going to make Richard pay for every ounce of cruelty. The next morning, Thomas picked up his phone. "Marcus, I need your services again," he said. On the other end was Marcus Chun, a former FBI investigator who specialized in corporate corruption. He had helped Thomas before during the embezzlement case. "What kind of trouble this time?" Marcus asked. "The kind that involves racism, abuse of power, and destroying an innocent family. I need solid evidence against Richard Blackwood." Marcus chuckled darkly. "That spoiled rich boy? Thomas, this'll be easier than stealing candy from a baby. Guys like him always leave a trail." And Richard did. By Monday, he was already pushing harder. He stormed into HR, slamming down a paper. "This employee has been arriving late every week," he claimed, talking about Diana. "And that child she drags here, causing disturbances." Sandra Miller, the HR director, frowned. She knew Diana's record. Perfect attendance for 2 years. "Mr. Blackwood, I'll have to check the records." "Records can be altered," Richard snapped, cutting her off. "I'm the vice president. My word should be enough." What Richard didn't know was that every word was being recorded by the security cameras he had personally ordered installed. But his cruelty didn't stop there. On Wednesday night, he intercepted Diana and Jasmine in the parking lot before their shift. His tall frame blocked their path. "I know you're doing more than cleaning to earn that extra cash," he sneered. "What kind of services are you really providing?" Diana froze, trembling with anger and fear. "Sir, what you're implying is..." "I'm implying that people like you always have a price. I just want to know what yours is." Jasmine clutched her mother's dress, whispering, "Mommy, why is that man so mean?" Diana knelt down, hugging her child. "Don't worry, my daughter. Some adults are unhappy and try to make others unhappy, too." Richard laughed cruelly. "Unhappy? I've got more money in my wallet right now than you'll ever see in your lifetime. That's why people like me should always keep people like you in your place." That night, Thomas watched the recording over and over, his fists tightening. His rage wasn't wild, it was controlled. Precise. Deadly. Marcus soon arrived with a dossier. "You were right," he said, spreading documents on the desk. "Look at this. 3 lawsuits. All the same pattern. Minority employees bullied, humiliated, and pushed out. Every time, his daddy paid to shut it down. And when things got too hot, they just moved him to another company." Marcus shook his head. "Richard Blackwood isn't a businessman. He's a professional parasite." Thomas leaned back in his chair, eyes cold. For the first time in years, he felt the thrill of battle. This wasn't about business anymore. It was about justice. And Richard had no idea that the game had already begun. Richard thought he was clever, smart enough to frame Diana for a crime she didn't commit. But what he didn't know was that every phone call, every word, every plan was already in Thomas's hands. And the trap that would destroy him had just snapped shut. Story continues. Thomas studied every page of Marcus's report. Richard wasn't just arrogant. He was a predator who used power and money to crush anyone weaker than him. "Marcus," Thomas said coldly, "I want everything. Phone calls, emails, social media, his daily patterns. Leave nothing hidden." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're planning something big, aren't you?" Thomas's answer was sharp. "I'm planning justice." The very next day, Sandra Miller, the HR director, quietly approached Thomas. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to talk to you. It's about Richard Blackwood." Thomas pretended to be surprised. "What about him?" He's pushing hard to fire Diana, she explained. But I can't find any legal reason. He keeps inventing violations that don't exist. Yesterday, he even suggested that people like her shouldn't be allowed in administrative areas after hours. People like her? Thomas repeated slowly. Sandra hesitated. Yes, sir. I believe there are discriminatory motives in his conduct. That was the opening Thomas needed. Sandra, document everything. Officially, if you suspect discrimination, open an internal investigation. But, sir, he's the vice president. And I'm the president, Thomas said firmly. Do it. That night, phase 2 of his plan began. He ordered the IT department to install extra microphones in all the places Richard liked to corner employees. Officially, it was a security upgrade. In truth, it was a trap, and Richard walked straight into it. On Friday night, thinking he was alone, Richard made a phone call. Thomas listened from his office as every word was recorded. Dad, remember that problem we talked about? Yeah, the black cleaning lady. She's becoming a problem. I need you to use your contact to create some legal trouble for her. Theft, false documents, anything to force her out. His father's voice came through the line. Richard, are you sure this is necessary? She's just a cleaning lady. It's a matter of principle, Richard snapped. If we let these people get too comfortable, they'll start demanding rights they don't deserve. Better to crush it now before others get ideas. Thomas sat back in his chair, feeling cold satisfaction. Richard had just admitted to conspiracy, racism, and abuse of power, all in his own words. By Monday morning, Marcus returned with more. He dropped a briefcase full of evidence on Thomas's desk. You're not going to believe this, Marcus said. Private social media accounts, full of racist rants. Closed chat groups where Richard and other executives joked about black employees. And it goes deeper. He used his father's influence to block minority candidates from promotions in other companies. 15 years of the same pattern. Thomas flipped through screenshots of Richard's messages. One read, "We need to keep those monkeys in their place. Show them who's boss from the start." Marcus, Thomas whispered, "This is gold." Marcus nodded grimly. But there's more. He's moving against Diana this week. I intercepted his messages. He's planning to stage a theft. Thomas's face hardened. What do you mean? He's going to plant something expensive in her cleaning supplies, then find it in front of everyone. He'll call the police, humiliate her, and try to destroy her. For the first time, Thomas felt his blood run cold. Richard wasn't just dangerous. He was reckless. But Richard had made one fatal mistake. He thought Diana was defenseless. He thought Thomas wasn't paying attention. He had no idea he was walking into the perfect trap. For 15 years, Richard Blackwood thought his money and his father's name made him untouchable. But tonight, the hunter became the prey. And the man who built his career on fear was about to taste it himself. Story continues. Thomas looked at Marcus, a smile flickering across his face but never reaching his eyes. Perfect. Let him try. The higher he climbs, the harder he'll fall. Because Richard Blackwood had no idea that every cruel move, every racist word, every abuse of power was already documented by someone who had turned justice into an exact science. And Thomas Mitchell had the resources to make sure this takedown would be remembered in every business circle for decades. Tuesday night, Richard moved forward with his plan. At exactly 8 p.m., he slipped a $15,000 Rolex into Diana's cleaning cart. Watching the cameras, he smirked. 15 minutes, he whispered. That's all I need. Then she's finished. But while Richard watched from one screen, Thomas monitored him from another, high-resolution feeds that Richard didn't even know existed. Outside, Marcus sat in a surveillance van, recording every angle. And just down the street, 3 investigative journalists waited, ready to see the truth unfold live. Marcus, Thomas said over the radio, he just planted the watch. Activate the backup feeds. Confirmed, Marcus replied. Every angle is rolling. He doesn't even know we're here. At 8:20, Richard descended into the office with 2 security guards. Diana was quietly cleaning while Jasmine sat nearby, working on homework. Mrs. Diana, Richard said with fake politeness. We've had reports of missing items. I need to check your supplies. Diana looked confused. Mr. Blackwood, I don't understand. It's standard procedure, Richard lied. heading straight for the cart. He pulled out the Rolex with an overacted gasp. Whoa, what's this? A $15,000 watch missing from Mr. Mitchell's office yesterday. Care to explain? Diana froze, her face pale. I've never seen that in my life. Of course not, Richard sneered. It just magically appeared in your cart. Mommy, what's going on? Jasmine whispered, frightened. Be quiet, child, Richard snapped cruelly. Your mother has some explaining to do. One guard lifted the phone, calling as instructed. Police? We need to report a theft in progress. And that's when the office door opened. Thomas walked in, calm and deliberate, with Marcus and three strangers Richard didn't recognize. Richard, Thomas said, his voice steady and sharp. I think you should hang up that phone. Richard turned, trying to mask his fear. Thomas, perfect timing. We just caught your employee stealing your watch. Thomas laughed coldly. My watch? Richard, I've been wearing an Apple Watch for 5 years. I've never owned a Rolex. Richard's confidence cracked. What are you saying? I'm saying we recorded you buying that watch this morning and planting it in Diana's cart. Marcus stepped forward with a tablet, swiping through footage. Here's angle 1. Here's angle 2. And here's angle 3. Your face clear as day, checking over your shoulder before you drop it in. Richard's throat tightened. This is ridiculous. Oh, but that's just the beginning, Thomas interrupted. Marcus, showing the rest. On a portable screen, Marcus projected the digital dossier. First came Richard's private posts. Racist slurs, supremacist rants. Need to keep these monkeys in their place, Marcus read aloud. That's you, right, Richard? Diana gasped, covering her mouth. Jasmine gripped her mother's hand tighter. Richard lunged toward the screen, but Thomas blocked him. Here's your recorded call to your father. Marcus continued. It's a matter of principle, you said. People like her don't deserve rights. Richard's face turned white, sweat rolling down his temples. Where did you get this? He stammered. Thomas's eyes narrowed. From the very system you installed to spy on employees. You built your own prison, Richard. For 15 years, Richard Blackwood believed money and power could bury every crime. But on this night, every lie, every cruelty, every secret came crashing down on him in front of cameras, colleagues, and the very people he thought he could crush. Story continues. Thomas leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. You approved all of this yourself, Richard, including that little call to your father, begging him to fabricate evidence against an innocent woman. One of the journalists stepped up. Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 News. Mr. Blackwood, how do you respond to overwhelming evidence of racial discrimination and criminal conspiracy? Richard's smirk vanished. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. You can't use that. I have rights, he shouted. Thomas folded his arms. You're absolutely right. You have the right to remain silent. Because anything you say will be used against you, not only by the police already on their way, but by the press, the board, and Diana's lawyers. Marcus clicked the tablet again, continuing the presentation. Here's your 15-year trail of discrimination. 3 lawsuits silenced with daddy's money. 8 Black and Latino employees you harassed until they quit. And of course, the recordings you didn't know existed. Thomas cut in coldly. Your threats to Diana in the parking lot. Your disgusting advances. All on tape. Another journalist shoved a mic forward. Mr. Blackwood, did you really use your position to systematically persecute minority employees? Richard panicked, trying to bolt for the door. But Marcus was already there, blocking his path with a grim smile. Oh, one more thing, Marcus added. Your bank accounts? Frozen an hour ago. Your family? Already informed. And the board? They've scheduled an emergency meeting tomorrow to strip you of your position and press charges. Diana, silent until now, finally spoke. Mr. Mitchell, did you know this was going to happen? Thomas looked at her, steady. I knew Richard was prejudiced. But when I discovered he planned to destroy you with false evidence, I decided it was time to stop watching from the shadows. A small voice cut through the silence. Jasmine, clinging to her mother's hand, looked up at Thomas. Mr. Thomas, will the bad man stop scaring Mommy now? Thomas knelt down to her eye level. His voice softened. No, sweetheart. He'll never bother you again. Richard, drenched in sweat, tried one last desperate move. Thomas, we can settle this between gentlemen. My family has investments, significant ones. You don't want this fight. Thomas's voice was a blade. Correction, your family had investments. Until 20 minutes ago, when the board voted unanimously to buy out every Blackwood share. Congratulations, Richard. You've destroyed not only your career, but your family's fortune. The doors burst open. Police officers stepped in. Richard Blackwood, Detective Harris announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy, harassment, racial discrimination, and attempted defamation." The cuffs snapped around Richard's wrists. He snarled at Diana, his mask finally gone. "This won't stand. My family still has influence." Marcus stepped forward one last time, his voice like a hammer. "Not anymore. The evidence hit every major news outlet this morning." "And your father?" He called, begging to be removed from the company's contact list. The final journalist turned her camera toward Diana. "Ms. Jefferson, how do you feel, knowing you've been fully vindicated and that the man who persecuted you will face justice?" Diana looked at Jasmine, then at Thomas. Her voice trembled, but carried strength. "I feel gratitude. Gratitude that people like Mr. Mitchell are willing to fight for justice, even when it would be easier to look away." 6 months later, two lives stood on opposite sides of history. One, rebuilt with dignity, love, and hope. The other, shattered forever, left in ruins. Story continues. Thomas watched Richard being led away in handcuffs, knowing this wasn't just prison. It was the death of Richard Blackwood's reputation, career, and family name. His downfall was so brutal, it would become a legend in business circles. "Diana," Thomas said quietly, "how would you feel about a promotion?" Through tears, Diana smiled. Jasmine clapped her little hands, not fully understanding, but sensing that her mother had won a great battle. Justice at last had been served. 6 months later, Diana Jefferson no longer walked the halls of Mitchell Enterprises as a cleaning lady. She was now the Director of Human Resources, a position Thomas created after discovering her unfinished business degree. Her very first act? A scholarship program for employees' children. Jasmine became the first to benefit, now attending the best private school in town. "Mommy, can I show Mr. Thomas my new drawing?" Jasmine asked, running through the office. She was 7 now, already dreaming of becoming a lawyer, to help people the way Mr. Thomas helped us. Thomas smiled, seeing how far they'd come. The company had since won national awards for inclusion and diversity, becoming a model across the country. The Fair Chance program, born from Diana's story, had already transformed over 200 families. Meanwhile, Richard Blackwood lived a very different reality. After serving 18 months in prison for discrimination and conspiracy, he emerged to a world that wanted nothing to do with him. No company would hire him. His wife divorced him, taking half of what little remained. His children disowned him, even changing their last name. Once a powerful vice president, Richard now sold used cars, earning less in a year than Diana did in 3 months. His racist posts still floated across the internet, killing any chance of rebuilding his image. Back at dinner, at their new home, Jasmine looked up during dinner. "Dad Thomas," she said softly, "my teacher asked us to write about our heroes. Can I write about you?" Thomas's eyes watered. "Sweetheart, the real hero here is your mother. She proved that honesty is worth more than all the money in the world." Diana reached for Thomas's hand. "No, the hero is the man who fought back, when it would have been easier to stay silent." 1 week later, Thomas's phone rang. "Mr. Mitchell," a voice said, "this is Michael Torres from CNN. We'd like to cover how your company became a national model for inclusion after the Blackwood case." That night, the story aired on prime time. Jasmine playing in the office where it all began, Diana thriving in her new role, and Thomas explaining how a 6-year-old girl changed his entire view of justice. And somewhere across town, in a dim 1-bedroom apartment, Richard Blackwood watched it all alone. His glass shook in his hand as he saw Diana's family, his old company, his old life, thriving without him. Every call he tried to make went unanswered. Everyone had blocked his number. The world had moved on. But Richard never would. "What if I told you that one man's kindness turned into a legacy so powerful it outlived hate itself. This is not just a story of revenge. It's the story of how love, faith, and one little girl changed everything. Thomas tried to move forward, but Richard's racist posts kept chasing him like ghosts online. No matter how many times Richard tried to start over, the internet never forgot. 3 years later, on Jasmine's 10th birthday, Thomas stood up during the party and made an announcement that silenced the room. "Jasmine Diana," he said with emotion, "you changed my life in ways I can never repay. That's why today, I'm creating the Jasmine Jefferson Educational Fund. For the next 50 years, this fund will pay for the college education of talented young black students across America." The little girl ran to hug him, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for believing in us when no one else did." That very same day, Richard was begging for a job at a small gas station. But when the manager searched his name online and found the article about his discrimination scandal, Richard was rejected on the spot. His downfall was so big, so public, that it became a case study in business schools, how arrogance and racism destroyed a man's future. Meanwhile, Thomas had built something greater than revenge. He turned a simple company into a national symbol of justice, creating hundreds of opportunities for people who had been overlooked for too long. The honesty of a 6-year-old taught me that the best answer to hate is love and action, Thomas said later during a speech at Harvard University. Years passed. Jasmine now attends a top prep school and has her eyes set on Harvard. Diana earned her MBA and became a respected national leader in human resources. And Thomas? He was honored by the government for his work in promoting racial equality. And Richard? He lives alone, working odd jobs. A forgotten man, remembered only as the example of what happens when hatred is louder than compassion. The truth was clear. Real justice was never about Richard's ruin. It was about proving that kindness, when guarded by strength, creates legacies that inspire generations. Back in Index Pointing Right, if this story moved you, subscribe for more true stories that show why doing good is always worth it, even when it feels impossible.